All right, in our series of going through the different tuning softwares from analytical tools to AI tuning softwares, today we're going to be taking a look at Quad Studio. Quad Studio sits somewhere in between an analytical tool and an AI tuning tool. It basically outlines a step-by-step process and gives you some feedback, but it's not using AI. So let's get into it. Let's see what it does, what it doesn't do, some of my thoughts on it, and try to understand some of the data and graphs that it gives along the way. So as mentioned, Quad Studio is an application you have to download and install on your computer, and then all the data is read locally from your black box logs. You would go to this quadstudio.io to download it. It is something that you need to purchase a license for long-term use, but there is a 15-day trial that you can enter into. Basically, you put your information in here, hit get license. It will email you a free trial. Although when I put the trial in, it said 5 days, not 15. So I'm not sure, 5 to 15 days of trial. And then you have these different options. So you'd have to repurchase it. It looks like every time there's if you want to get the next major release. It also does offer an OpenTX companion or EdgeTX companion. You can see here you can download. So this is essentially a Lua script with some nice features that you can edit the Betaflight sliders right on the screen. And that kind of fits into how this works because it's going to be asking you to do a number of flights, up to 8 batteries it says you might need to tune your quad. So it's really stepping you through a process, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more. For this video, we are going to be using the beta release of the software that more recently came out. So you can see here that's saying it's version 1.4.110. It's also here at the top. And here it does say, I notice here now, it does say 14 days here under my thing. This is when I entered the license, which you'd go to the help and about, and then there's the install license where you'd put this stuff. And that's instructions in the email that you get as well. So once you install it and launch it, you get this screen here. It's fairly simple across the top, which is good. That's a good thing. You don't want it to be overly complex. But at the end of the day, you have these load logs. You can load them from a file on your computer, or you can do direct from the flight controller. When you do go into the load logs, I have noticed that, you need to click down and hit the all files here. They have it only searching for BBL or CSV files, but Betaflight's, at least the latest releases, put an extension BFL. There's all kinds of different extensions. At the end of the day, they all work fine. So if you don't see your logs, just change this to all files, and then you can click your specific logs here. You can open them multiple at a time, so you can select a bunch of them. You can see I have a bunch selected here, and it will load them all kind of at the same time. If you do grab too many, though, it might kind of run out of memory or have some issues, so do be aware of that. So now if I have 2 logs turned on here, you can kind of see a heads up of both at the same time. And you can kind of compare and see how these are fairly simple, similar flights. One is a chirp, and one is just wobble, the wobble script, and doing those moves on a tuned quad. Here's the same quad, just doing chirps. So you can see I did throttle ramps fairly consistently, I would say, between the two. This is my altitude. And then you can just see the different moves here for the different axes, and obviously that's going to look different between the chirp and the wobble. Up here, there's the display mode, light, dark, so on and so forth. You have just some visual things up here that you can adjust and check. You can tell to ignore the yaw axis for comparisons, things of that nature. And just different settings that you can adjust. Prioritize noise and filtering comparison, auto trim. There's a certain amount, 2 seconds, that it's going to do off each end, so it doesn't count you taking off and bounces or bouncing when you land, things like that. In here as well is some settings under devices where you can connect directly to your quad's flight controller with it. To hit test connection, it will go through a number of steps just to make sure the interface is working and everything's okay. So I would recommend doing that. You can select your COM port here as well. Make sure you have that one right. For example, my flight controller is on COM port 4, so I want to make sure that's selected here. Now I'm going to come back to tools here in just a second, but let's just cover the rest of the stuff. So view, these are just some of the charts that we're seeing up here, so you can check and uncheck, and that's really just these charts that you're seeing here. You can go ahead and collapse those. You can pin them. For example, this is the pin collapse thing, and you can see there's some stuff not showing here, like the roll moves. These are specifically just the roll moves. And that's related to this waveform down here. There's just specifically throttle stuff. So some of the stuff's collapsed. Again, you can go into here and turn on different things depending on what you want to see right there, battery voltage, GPS, a bunch of other things. As we talked about over here, this is where you can load different logs. So after you open a bunch, they're in here. You can check them on and off to load, to kind of display them overlapping on these graphs or not. The backup library here, I haven't really used that yet, but that's where I believe you can set that, and then as it's making setting changes to your flight controller, it will back up stuff so that you can go back and get that. If you don't like a setting change, you can restore the old settings. Another really important thing here is just the help. So in the help, we can click on that. You can check for updates. You can see here, you can include beta releases. You can visit the website directly there. But if you hit about, under about is the help section for like reading about what this does and how it does it and what the waveforms are and things of that nature. So you check this out directly from the author. This is just kind of an overview of how it works and why it uses waveforms versus step response. There's stuff about the menus here, the damping waveform, noise waveform, and I would also look at compare damping and compare noise. It really talks about how those waveforms are created, some of the maths behind what you're kind of looking at here waveform wise. I would like to see it a little bit more robust, but at least there's something in here about it. And we'll talk about the waveforms here in a little bit more in a second. Some other helpful things in here is more on Quad Companion, which is that LewisScript app, and then also this QuadLink, which sounds like that's still in development, and that will just help with power cycling instead of unplugging and unplugging your flight controller to get access to the mass storage device or reset, so it takes away access to the mass storage device. This would help automate that. Right now, when it goes to access a log, it has to put it in the mass storage device mode, and then to get that back so it can push settings to flight controller, you have to unplug the flight controller and plug it back in manually yourself. It seems like reading this QuadLink will help with that and just automate just a little bit more. So now with that out of the way, let's come back to the tools menu here. This is where really most of the meat is for what you can use this for. Some simple things here, refresh charts, blah, blah, blah. There is a pretty cool rate converter here. So you can go into here, put in your rates for whatever you're using, and then switch them to whatever other system you'd like to use. So if you're using Betaflight rates, and then want to start using actual rates. So I use actual rates here, and say I wanted to put them in here, and I have these here, and I have my 1,000 degrees per second. Let's just do that quick, and that, something like that. And I wanted to see what those would look like under Betaflight rates. You can go ahead and have that toggled. So you can see I can't really get a one-to-one match on that. Actually, no, hold on. Sorry, I can get a one-to-one match on that, or a little bit closer, I guess, to some extent. So it would show you kind of what your rates would need to be to kind of match this over here. So let me do the overlay source. So there you go. So you can see here for my Betaflight rates, I can get really close. This is the roll and pitch, and then the yaw is down here. So I can get really, really close. You can see here KISS. I can get not as close. There's, the curves here is not going to match perfectly. I can get really, really close on the quick rates. It's because it's kind of the same architecture. And then race flight, which is kind of dead anyways. But, so that's semi-neat. Yeah, so add source rates, add converted rates, so on and so forth. You can kind of look at different presets up here for rate profiles to select and things of that nature. So nice little tool there if you need to do that for whatever reason. So that's kind of neat. You have your PID simulation here as well. So this will open up a dialog where you can adjust your sliders based on the log information here. We'll talk about that here in a second, but that's meant to, like, as I can move this stuff up and down, I can try to get closer to Unity. So if you read the instructions, you'll understand what that is. This is essentially the Unity line, which we're trying to get closer to, from what I understand from reading everything and using this. So let's start getting into that here a little bit. There's things like you can do, like calculate your dynamic idle amount, calculate your some RPM filter settings, like the Q factor and things of that nature, dynamic notch, some settings there to calculate and give us some recommendations on that. You can find, if you just do a hover, find your stick hover amount and then push that to the flight controller. You can compare, these are all only available down there at the bottom when you have 2 logs selected. So as you can see here, once I unchecked one of those logs from up here, then these compare things kind of go away. So this is the meat of it right here, is of what you can do with it. So let's go back into here, check on both, and really talk about what the core of this is. This is not a PID recommendation software. Like, I'm going to do a flight and it's going to say to me, hey, here's your PIDs, like an AI tool would be, which we'll get into in the next video. But this does go a step beyond, I would say, somewhat, of the analytical tools. The analytical tools in my previous video, which I'll make a link down below if you're not watching these concurrently, they just give you the set of information to look at your logs. They don't kind of step you through a process. This starts to step you through a process. So it can show you up here that this process, if you go to manual walkthrough, this is the process that it wants to kind of go through for quad tuning. You can do a thing like, you can say this is the manual walkthrough process and you kind of just do this manually, but it does have this guided mode up here at the top. So in guided mode, you can see down here at the bottom that says, let's tune my quad. You click on that, and then this dialog will come up, basically saying make sure your ESC is good, new props, drones, all up configuration is expected to, intended to fly. The battery's full, recommended 8 charged batteries you may need to get through this process. The quads, black box, all logs are, cleared from it to get the initial logging going, because it will then clear the stuff for you. The drones plugged in, the USB, all that kind of stuff to get going. Would you want to start the guided mode? You hit yes. And then it will start to apply settings to your flight controller. You can see down here, would you like to tune a cinematic or freestyle? So I'm going to go freestyle. What black box type do you have on your flight controller? I have I guess I would say SD card, because it's onboard data flash. What erase method does your flight controller use? I don't friggin' know, man. I don't even know. What's this? See if there's a help here. Yeah, perfect. There's a help. Format is the type used when your target supports formatting of a log storage. Yeah, thanks. CLI is used when the target clears logs through the CLI erase command instead. I'm going to go formatting, because it's an SD card kind of thing. Would you like to include a debug data in your log? Sure. Would you like to apply loss ability while testing? Sure. Plug in the craft and click next. Okay. And it will go ahead and access my flight controller and start to put in the settings to start to do its guided first tune flight stuff. So now I'm getting on here. What do I like to do? Dynamic idle, all that kind of stuff. Sure, yeah, why not? Perform one steady hover while keeping the craft at a steady altitude for 15 seconds with a little pitch and roll inputs as possible. When done, plug in your craft and click next. All right, so I can unplug this and do that. But before I do that, I'm interested to see what this changed. So I'm going into here, going to go and connect with Betaflight. I still have the Quad Studio up. I just went and opened Betaflight thing and connected here. You can see it's all defaults yet. That looks okay. What did it do for a dynamic idle? I guess not. Well, I'm not sure if it was at 20 or not. So that's at 20. It looks like it adjusted my rates way down. So now those are 100. So it really flattened out my rates, probably because it wants this hover and it wants as little inputs as possible. And my filters are at these settings. I'm not sure if that's what I had or not. So that's what the filter settings are at. So I'm assuming it didn't change those, that it would start at default. If it wanted to do anything, it wouldn't turn off low pass 1 and things like that. So that's probably what I had. So it probably didn't change these settings at all. Did change these for sure. I definitely did not have that at 100. The defaults, Betaflight defaults, which makes sense. I might have already had it at default for all I know. Clicking on my mass storage for my black box logs, it does not look like it erased that. So maybe I picked the wrong thing, or maybe it just doesn't erase it the first step. All right, so I'm back. I went out, did my hover for at least 15 seconds. I did jump in and erase those logs and then rename this one to log 1. Let's hit next. Calculating the dynamic idle. Interesting. So it's accessing the log here. You can see it pulled up the mass storage. So I'm just going to close that. Now you can't see it because it shut up my other window, unfortunately, but it says, please reconnect USB, and it has like a little image of somebody. So it's wanting me to unplug my flight controller and then plug my flight controller back in. So a little prompt came up to show me to do that. And now it's doing its thing here again. So this is what it came up with here. Hover ERPM is around 829. Dynamic idle ratio 65%. I don't know where it's coming up with that. So suggested is the 539, which rounds up to 540. So then you take, you move the decimal over 1 because it's just how Betaflight is. And your recommended dynamic idle value is 54. That is high. This quad typically would be, it works at 20. I think that's what I had it at, 20. And you really want your dynamic idle to be as low as possible, not that high. It's going to make it really floaty with it that high. So apply this dynamic idle value to your flight control. This will only apply the dynamic idle value and set transition throttle limit equals 0. It will not configure the bidirectional D-shot ERPM telemetry. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do that. And let it do its thing. So the next thing it's asking me here is, would you like to calculate and apply RPM filter? RPM filters require bidirectional. Yes. Perform one bouncing hover for 15 seconds. Smoothly raise and lower the altitude like a yo-yo while keeping pitch, roll, and yaw movements to a minimum. When finished, plug in your craft and hit next. So this is where I think I need to jump in. This is where it starts to get a little, off. It was all nicey nice. So here's where I'll start bitching. The problem, the core issue with Quad Studios is it's basing everything off of very small movements, almost like a basement tune kind of scenario. Very little movements, very little throttle range, and then it's giving you some settings. You can see here that dynamic idle was just 1. The other thing is, it just so you know what this is and isn't, it's not giving you really recommended PID values per se. You're going to do a number of tests, which I'm not going to get into all that. Well, you'll do like move this setting to this, now move this setting to that, like uptick the sliders, 1, 0.2, 0.2, 0.1, whatever it's going to go through. And then it will graph all that stuff. And the ones here that have the lowest, in this waveform thing, you'll see like multiple you'll see multiple ones coming through here. The one that's the closest to this unity line, let me get my big body out of the way here. The one that's closest to this unity line is the best out of those flights you do. So it's just manually stepping you through with 8 packs. I can tune a quad in like a pack. I would even argue you don't even really need to tune much anymore. Just pick a preset and then adjust your master slider. So that's aside, but it's just this whole process, and it's very little movements too. So those don't really translate to good settings for full dynamic flight stuff. These little movements versus, if you're going to be flying freestyle, you need to really give it the beans like you do in freestyle to evaluate your tune at your rates and all these things, and you tune it based off that. It's not this analog where it's like, oh, I can just do little bitty wobbles and that will give me data, and then I can apply that to these massive sweeping moves. It doesn't work like that. So that's where I see a fundamental kind of issue with this, with the chirp and with the wobble and all that kind of stuff. And we showed that in the first video about how the sharp stick inputs were the best analog for data analysis for interpreting and step response graphs and really getting a tune and just looking at the stuff in Blackbox if you're wanting to just look at it directly. But let me go through some of the stuff that I noticed in here to kind of back up what I'm saying, what I just said. So before I get into the next bit, I did try to load like 3 logs and then click the thing and it had an issue, so it crashed. And then I brought the software back up. What's really nice here is it kind of saved a point. So you can see here, continue with my previous tune or start the new tune. So that's kind of nice that it kind of keeps waypoints. So if you have to close the software and come back and you're in the middle of this process, it retained that and you can continue on from there. That aside, so I loaded up 3 logs here. One is Betaflight 2025-12 or 0.12, 2026, 0.06, 2026.06, and these are just different moves. So this is an older, this is a chirp with no feed forward, wobble, tuned, and then this is chirp tuned. This is also the same tune. So this is tuned. All 3 of these are the same tune, and you can look right here. 74, I 132, D 54. Going to the next one, same values. Go to the next one, same values. So this software, if you read about it, is looking at the deviation in these waveforms, and it's basically adding up the deviation from your stick inputs to your gyro. But it's missing a piece to that. It's assuming these subtle little moves with these prescribed inputs that you're going to give it. That, and then it's adding the deviation from set point to gyro. Well, you will just get a bigger deviation from set point to gyro just by doing bigger stick inputs. So that is going to then change. Now, if you're using the same exact step inputs and using all the same parameters, then sure, you can compare all those logs together and see where you get the lowest amount of deviation here, and apply those settings. Again, you will need to, if you're doing little bitty stick inputs, then that will be a tune for little bitty stick inputs. Then if you go out to do big, huge stick inputs, it's going to be a different ballgame. So you can compare, apples to apples, A to B to C from the same log, same stick inputs, same all that kind of stuff. But if you go and compare 2 different logs, with one with low stick inputs and one with high stick inputs, even with the same tune, like you're seeing here, like, oh, well, this tune's better than that tune. It's the same tune. Oh, well, this tune's better than that tune. It's the same tune. It's just one has more stick inputs. The wobble, you can see over here up at the top here, must have more stick input than the chirp with no feed forward. And again, this is even more so. This is the chirp. This is also the chirp. Same damn tune. They're very close to each other here, but they're not showing the same result. Like here, look at this. Like, oh, this tune's better than that tune. It's the same tune. It's the same chirp script. So yeah, and I don't even know what the hell this graph means. I've read it. I don't even know stuff like tau n. Like, what units are this? What's this along the bottom, guys? Axes. Like, label your dang axes. This is like engineering 101, right? Like, what is this axis? Here we get at the top, this is time in seconds, and this is throttle over output percent. That's properly labeled axes. Same thing here. But then we get to these waveforms, and like, there's no axis on the bottom, there's no label. This just says damping waveform. What units is that? So I don't, other than looking at these graphs and knowing, hey, the closer it is to this line, the better, for the exact same inputs and everything, same rate, same amount of input, maybe subtle changes in your tune, then that's okay. But outside of that, if you do higher inputs, then it's a whole, you can only compare, then there'd be apples to oranges. You have to compare apples to apples with all this. So making sure I just get to talk about what these compares do. Essentially, it just looks at these graphs, and whichever one, again, is closer to the unity line, it's going to say is best. So if I go into here and hit compare roll damping, I have 2 logs selected. It's just going to go and tell me the settings for the one that's closer to this line here. So it's going to give me the blue line, which is going to be this tune. It's chirp with feed forward. And you can see the feed forward is right there. It basically gives a result to each one, whatever is the, I guess, the lowest. Yeah, I guess whatever is the lowest deviation, that's what it's going to tell you the settings are here. So it should tell you this log, not just these specific settings. But nevertheless, that's what it does. That's what each of these will do. Yaw, pitch, roll, overall best, roll, pitch. These are the noise plots, same deal. Again, it's the same filter settings between this and this that you can see here. So it's going to tell me this filter settings is better than this filter settings, but it's the same damn settings. So yeah. And feed forward, like one has, it's a chirp move, same firmware, same filter settings, just one has feed forward and one doesn't. So yeah, for the roll, pitch, yaw waveform, sure, the one with feed forward is going to have less error, but for the filter stuff, feed forward doesn't change how much your filter performance or give you more gyro noise or any of that stuff. So yeah. So I do need to go and do some more hop tests, but I did do this on a log that I had before where I did the calculate dynamic notch values here and RPM, and it did not give me good recommendations that I would normally follow. It had me moving the dynamic notch max down below where the resonance peak was, and I can show you what I'm talking about there. So if you look at this log, and this is what I was looking at, it must have been the snap stick inputs default. It was telling me to bring the dynamic notch max down to like 184. Well, my resonance spike, which you could see it's right here. When the RPM gets to here, you can see it resonates throughout the whole frame, essentially here. Well, it's the other way around, I should say. This resonates under all throttle conditions. You can see throttle sweeping up and down here. This will, in the entire range of throttle throughout the whole thing, that you have this resonance spike here. So moving your dynamic notch down below this, not a good idea. It also told me to take the Q factor from 300 to 600, making it really narrow and sharp. That might be okay, but generally I keep the dynamic notch a little wider. So maybe that's just tit for tat. It would recommend something I just generally don't do, but definitely bringing the max down below that resonance spike was not a good recommendation. So that's my review of Quad Studio. Although I think the software is pretty well put together for its guided mode, to interact with the flight controller, push the settings, grab the black box logs, automatically bring it in, analyze it. I think there's just some fundamental things that I think might fall short. If you have a big quad where subtle movements are kind of what that does, then this is more closely aligned to that and maybe is something that can step you through that process. Something that we're just bobbing up and down is pretty much the extent of your filter, your noise filtering. Like the things that it's asking you to do are pretty close to what it's going to do. But a 5-inch quad or something smaller where you're going to be really doing heavy dynamic moves, full range, all the way up to 100% throttle and things of that nature, that's not what this is gauged towards. The guided process is pretty refined, like I said, to step it through that. I struggle with, some of the fundamentals there. So what do you think? Any comments you'd have down below? And if you'd like to see me just step through this all the way, let me know and I can do a follow-up with it. Begrudgingly, I'll go through the entire process and see what I get. See if I get the same tune that I have from the Tune Quad. I pretty much know the answer is going to be no already, but I'd do it if people would be interested in it. So let me know down below. Thanks, everybody. I hope this was helpful for you to get a better understanding of what Quad Studio is and isn't, and we'll see you on the next one.